In 2021, Shinji Mikami was filmed in an interview about the game he made right off the coattails of Resident Evil 4, God Hand. In the interview, Shinji, one of the few game developer personalities I consider to be an absolute bro.
Her name's Ashley Graham, the president's daughter.
Is she... well, you know.
Don't worry, she's cool.
Explains that he thought he earned a whole lot of street cred from Capcom because of his contributions, since he wasn't only just there for the massive success of 4, but the original Resident Evil as well, which, no shit by now, coined a whole genre of horror. Since Capcom owed him that street cred, he finally wanted to make a game that he wanted to make, since Resident Evil 4 was just banking on name brand. That started God Hand, which was about ripping guys' balls off and punishing women, very progressive for its time. But sadly, due to the nature of business as it was back in gaming and still now, Shinji couldn't be afforded the staff, nor much real funding, or decent chunk of time to make what he truly wanted. And in the end, God Hand ended up in the same role that it was always meant to be for, in the irony of it all. It was a good game for a select few, and it still carries that entire motto into it to this very day.
Great game for a very select few people.
We made a game for us too. Like, we wanted the game we couldn't buy.
More importantly, it didn't sell well, and got shat on by reviewers who were only a decade away from writing articles about how popping acid the right way is what saved their oh-so-hard yappy upper-middle-class lifestyle marriages. Actually, fuck that. What it actually did, and that was the worst of all, was that it convinced Shinji Mikami that making a game that he wanted to make was a thing that he shouldn't do. You might be wondering what any of this has to do with the Unity game engine situation that had a nuclear meltdown about a week back, but bear with me, I'm getting to that right now.
I'd probably make my own engine because I'm a total code. I enjoy programming enough and tech stuff enough, and this is an area that people argue about a lot, but I feel very passionately about. If at all possible, own the source code for your stuff. It has saved our butts so many times, and some people are thinking right now, I'm not a tech person, I'm a creator. I use an engine so I don't have to learn how to code, so my source code wouldn't do me any good. To which I respond that what you may have overlooked is that you don't need to know how to program. If you have the source code, you find some hungry kid out of college, you hand him a basket of our Earth dollars, and you say, here's my mess, make it work. And then they disappear, and they come back, and your engine works, they have money and something to put on a resume, you have a working machine that spits out dollars, and you both get on with your lives. But you can only do it if you have the source code.
I had the same path as a lot of other game developers, honestly. I was 13 years old and I Googled game making program and I found this thing called Game Maker and I just kind of stuck with it. Right when I graduated college, I actually applied to a bunch of different game development companies and I didn't hear back from a single one. So at that point I was like, I either have the choice where I can keep trying and go work for another game development company where I'm not having a lot of success, or I can just continue making my own games and having my own company and doing my own projects.
And there are different schools for a lot of those things. Even if you go to one of those schools, the people that we tend to hire have done a ton on their own. That'll only take you so far. There are a lot of tools out there, including ours, where, go ahead. Most of our level designers here had to make a plugin that we played, even if they had some experience. Go ahead and make something that we could ship. Our tools are out. Make something that could have come out with Oblivion or Fallout. And it's a very easy way for us to see this person has it. People, we're so lucky that so many people buy this stuff, so we get to grow and do it bigger and better each time. Looking off was always, I want to make games. I was very much a self-taught programmer, even in college, writing my own stuff.
Well, I think part of the reason I got interested in technology, maybe the reason was video games. So, I probably wouldn't have started programming if it wasn't for video games, or wouldn't have been as interested in computers and technology if it wasn't for video games. So I think actually video games are a very powerful force for getting young kids interested in technology. It has way bigger knock-on effects than people may realize. And generally, like if we're interviewing somebody for a software engineering role at Tesla or SpaceX, many times they'll be like, how'd you start programming? It's like, oh, got into video games, over and over again. And I think many of the best software engineers in the world are at or spent much of their career at video games houses. And especially if people had to try to create incredibly realistic graphics using very little compute power, that's a hard problem. And so a lot of people had to write really tight code and come up with really clever ideas to do that.
Do you think people like Shinji Mikami would have ever felt like throughout their entire career spanning decades that making a game for themselves to play and sell was in any way wrong if something like the tools necessary to make games were made readily accessible and free to use a lot sooner? Throughout Shinji's entire career, he only ever made games for the companies that wanted them. That's not to say that they're bad games, but ultimately there were games that the company wanted and that really he was compromising on. When the Unity situation happened, everyone lost their shit because of this new runtime fee imposed. It's because we felt like there was an attack on indie gaming as a whole, which is the only real way developers like Shinji Mikami can make a game of everything they want to do without having to go through the red tape of AAA gaming companies. Without free-to-use engines with at the very least generous ways to turn profit that aren't intrusive, you're killing the part of the gaming industry that is supposed to be the alternative to the risk-free, play-it-safe cultural wasteland out there that Shinji has had to endure. Let's get something straight off the bat right away. Life isn't getting any better, you aren't getting any younger, and it's one thing if that's what we got to live with, but it's another if we can't escape from that for a while. That's what gamers and developers in the indie scene can learn about what it is we do. They say there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, but that doesn't mean there isn't consumption that keeps a culture alive and intact, which is exactly what this all is. So what do you think it means that Unity tries to pull this over us on an engine that is responsible for 40 through 60% of all indie games? On Unity, you would see another classic Resident Evil. You would see another Silent Hill. Engines like Unity made it possible to begin with for nobody, no-name, little dick developers to make games that made history, man. So when something crucial and instrumental to the construction of an amazing art form, akin to a pencil, or form of media if you will, is not just being attacked but put at risk like this, you best bet you should be the first person in line to suggest open source alternatives like Godot.
Fortune and your fame might be figuring out the way to break that rule. And, you know, in 2 days, grown-up GDC is going to start. Real GDC is going to start. And these halls are going to be filled with Microsoft people, Electronic Arts people, and Activision people walking down the hall like they're too cool for school and looking at me like there's something they just scraped off their shoe. And there's going to be high-powered consultants here whose job is to charge a fortune to stand in the corner of the room and pretend they're the person who knows something. Don't be fooled. Nobody knows anything, and this is your art form just as much as theirs. Stu.
Shocks most people. You know, they think of a video game as a few people in their garage, and you say, no, this is 50, 60 people for 3.5 years. Like, what? A lot of people, I think that video games are, you know, purely kids, so it's like a toy. So, you know, why would you put that much effort into something that's a toy?
Video game developers may be humble toy makers at the end of the day, but we're the letter C for an A to B life that requires a ton of stress relief and escape. We're the reason why kids go to sleep at night and dream of things. Solo indie development is an interesting, beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing because it means you don't have to go through a huge corporation to make a fighting game and feel like you're extorting their funds to develop it in secret. It means if you're a film school dropout, it can show for better and for worse, someplace else. You can be the reason why someone has been fishing for 300 hours and deprocessing the events of the day. This has been your boy, Nightcried, signing out, and here's I Wanna Go Back to a Flashback by yours truly, to help you in your defense of everything that is good around you that makes you whole.